Sam Seder here. This is the live broadcast of the Majority Report. And as you probably have heard, there's a bit of a YouTube apocalypse that has been going on. Many news and politics channels have lost their advertising because of an algorithm that Google has implemented as a function of ads showing up on hate-filled channels. Well, we got caught up in that, and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved. So we need your help. You've probably heard from other channels that they're asking people to donate to a Patreon site. We are asking the same so that we can operate this YouTube feed without a cost to us. I mean, we don't look at YouTube as a huge revenue maker for us, but we need your help so that we're not losing money on it. So head over to our Patreon site. Here is the URL. We need your help. Just a couple of bucks, $2-3 a month would really help us out. Thanks so much and enjoy the show. Hi, folks. Folks, you got to protect your data. Behind the scenes, VMware's cybersecurity software is working overtime to ensure our virtual environments are safe and secure. Technologies and VMware are here to offer you a free demo of their virtualization software. Go to dhtech.com/demo. That's dhtech.com/demo. to find out how to protect your organization today.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder. It's time to look in the mirror, America. Do you like what you see?
I keep referring to Obama as the magic Negro.
Do you like what you see now?
Well, suck on this.
It's just a mirror, America.
Shared sacrifice by everybody.
What could it do to you except reflect your image?
I did nothing wrong at the Minneapolis airport.
The Majority Report.
Far more credible to me than PBS and Frontline.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, June 29th, 2017. My name is Sam Seder. This is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Pokross Professor of Law and Social Policy, Director of the Institute on Assets and Social Policy at Brandeis University, Thomas Shapiro, on his book, Toxic Inequality: How America's Wealth Gap Destroys Mobility, Deepens Racial Divide, and Threatens Our Future. Also on the program today, repeal and replace bribes are now on the table. Cruz offers a death spiral option. Rex Tillerson explodes as everyone wonders if Trump will even have a cabinet 6 months from now. Meanwhile, his lawyer, Jay Sekulow, now under investigation in 2 states for his profitable nonprofit.
Right.
Meanwhile, dawn shines on Marblehead. The center realizes it's not just Trump. Single payer dead in California for the time being. And Trump, Mika, and Morning Joe in a menage a dumb. Lastly, Trump administration sets up travel ban restrictions. Sorry, Grandma. If you come from one of those countries and you have family here, you're a security threat. All that and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get right into this. There's still, it appears to be the case that right now there will be no vote, like it appeared yesterday, no vote on healthcare until after the July 4th recess. However, there is also a massive push to get to a broad general agreement amongst the Republicans. I have been predicting since the other day, basically just as a function of what we saw with the House, that we're going to start seeing bribes. $200 billion worth of money. It's basically a slush fund that is not real dollars, but dollars that would be handed out in the course of crafting this legislation. Reported today by Politico, Senate Republicans and the White House have agreed to add at least $45 billion to their Obamacare repeal bill to address the opioid crisis. And that, of course, would be for Capito and Portman, maybe also in Maine for Collins, and our near agreement on allowing consumers to use health savings accounts money to pay for their premiums. That is for Ted Cruz. So as we mentioned yesterday,
But not a single word about Van Jones blowing the whole lid off the Russia story, which you and Rachel and Chris Hayes are so obsessed with covering. And by the way, pretty soon, my wife's going to send her regards to Van Jones. Are you going to cover it on the Majority Report? Wannabe MSNBC, as I call it? Hashtag fake news, hashtag not progressive, hashtag neoliberal shill.
well, the opioid figure could rise. So they're looking to come up with a deal, at least a broad strokes of a deal by the end of the week. Then, so they can send that deal to the CBO. When they come back, they'll vote on it. Believe me, there will be virtually no town halls that these Republicans will hold. You still have got to pressure them. Let's go back in the Wayback Machine, ladies and gentlemen, to a time where Mitch McConnell actually felt like he had to get elected by his constituents, didn't have such huge corporate money backing him in Kentucky, and didn't see the destruction of healthcare really ultimately, though, for the sake of huge tax cuts for the rich, to be his single lasting legacy in the Senate. Let's go back to that time. It was a kinder time. It was the 1990s when he would put videos on the television like this.
I was a child and my dad was in World War II. I got polio. I recovered, but my family almost went broke. Today, too many families can't get decent, affordable health care. That's why I've introduced a bill to make sure health care is available to all Kentucky families, hold down skyrocketing costs, and provide long-term care.
You don't have to be a doctor to deliver health care to Kentucky. Senator Mitch McConnell, on the job for Kentucky's future.
Yes, and he referenced that he had polio, I think it was, right? And that was, apparently it was the March of Dimes, which was a FDR private charity that helped him out. So
I prefer children that survive polio and then marry into Taiwanese trafficking families. But that's just me.
And now, of course, at that time, there was no Medicare or Medicaid, which it sounds like would have helped him out, perhaps. But be that it may, Yeah, be that as it may, Mitch McConnell has moved on from all that and is now in the business of just getting massive tax cuts for wealthy people and pretend like it's a healthcare deal. The one other little twist here, Ted Cruz is floating an idea that in addition to his health savings accounts, people perceive as another possible solution here. And that is to allow, to basically come to the compromise. You can have an insurance company, if they want to sell private insurance, individual market, they can sell whatever they want as long as they offer one plan that is Obamacare compliant. So in other words, we're going to offer, imagine if you will, you have a car lot and you can sell whatever you want and call it a car. As long as you sell one car that actually has an engine and brakes and functions once you get on the highway. What will happen? People will come in. Now just imagine everybody needs to have a car because they may need a car at one point. They walk in. The car that is compliant with everything that defines a car is much more expensive than the other ones. What's going to happen is people who know they're going to need their insurance, because many of us don't realize that we will until it's too late. But the people who know, the people with pre-existing conditions, the people who anticipate, I don't know, maybe who are older, they're going to attempt to buy the insurance that's actually functional. What's going to happen is you're going to have more sicker people who are going to buy that insurance. It is going to raise the cost of that insurance. And the delta between the actual good insurance and the crappy insurance is going to get larger. It is effectively the high-risk pool model. We're going to shunt all the people who are ill, provide them insurance, and we won't deny them insurance. We won't give them lifetime or annual caps. But it's going to be so super expensive. I mean, this may be the agreement they come to, but when it goes to the CBO, you're going to see similar, if not worse, numbers in many respects. Because the numbers, if you were to actually impose the idea of high-risk pools onto our healthcare system nationally, are devastating. But that very well may do it. We may see this happen, folks. So continue pressuring these senators. Don't stop now. Don't stop over the break. All right, we're going to take a break of our own. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to Brandeis professor Thomas Shapiro about his book, Toxic Inequality, How America's Wealth Gap Destroys Mobility, Deepens the Racial Divide, and Threatens Our Future. We'll be right back.
Took
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program the Pokross Professor of Law and Social Policy and the Director of the Institute on Assets and Social Policy at Brandeis University, Thomas Shapiro, author of Toxic Inequality, How America's Wealth Gap Destroys Mobility, Deepens the Racial Divide, and Threatens Our Future. Tom, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So this is, we should say, is in some respects, I don't want to say a sequel, but I'm a fan of the 7 Up series of British documentaries, and in some ways, this is that of social policy, if you will, in this particular area. Just give us a sense of broadly speaking your methodology, and then I want to switch back into the policy implications, and then we'll switch back into the stories, because this is really, there's 2 books in one in some respects here.
Great, thanks. So one of the main databases in this book is a set of interviews that we first did with nearly 200 families in 1998 and 1999. The families are from 3 cities, half white, half African American, half working class, half middle class, half inner city, if you will, half suburban within each of those 3 cities. And all those families had young children about 5 years old, because we wanted to capture how the family wealth or lack of wealth was shaping their plans around their community, their schooling choices for their kids, and their own careers and their own networks. Luckily, that turned into a book called The Hidden Cost of Being African American that was published a little over 10 years ago now. And luckily, I was able to find some financing to redo that set of interviews. We wanted to capture them about 12 years later, when the kids, then 5, would be young adults, and either at the point of graduating high school, if they were on track, or to see what had happened to their lives in the interim. So we were able to get to a little over 80% of those families again in the 2010, 2011, and a smattering in the 2012 period. Of course, in the interim there, we had this awful natural experiment called the Great Recession and the housing implosion. So that provided another set of impetus for us in that particular study. So that's the basic. I like to tell stories, but I like to hang those stories on the real scaffolding of nationally representative surveys. So the stories tell us about the processes and why families are doing what they're doing, what they're thinking about, and be able to generalize from that. So that's the quick setup.
Yeah, and let's. I also want to touch on just the on your title, because I think over the past 5 or 6 years we've heard a lot about wealth inequality, but you both sort of qualify the nature of the inequality that you're dealing with in 2 different ways. One, you're saying that there is a particularly virulent inequality in that it's toxic, and also that the problem with inequality is not simply a social justice one, but a functional one for society. Walk us through those elements of that particularly toxic inequality.
Sure. So I wanted a title that was able to distinguish where we are now in the United States, and I would actually argue where we've been headed since the early 1970s, from our earlier points in time. And the distinguishing features for me are really, it's several-fold. Toxic inequality really is an unprecedented convergence of historic highs in inequality in both income and wealth, and that's pretty well known and extremely well and compellingly documented. But that's also combined with the United States being in an era of stalled family mobility, where economic mobility, to the extent it still exists, has gotten to the anemic stage, shall we say, and families are really having to navigate that by literally putting more paid workers in the workforce just to try and stay in the same spot. Those intersect with a widening racial wealth gap. which is something I have been doing a lot of work, both on the scholarly side and on the advocacy activist side for a couple of decades now. That racial wealth gap, the way we look at it and measure it, following the same set of families, has tripled between 1984 and 2013. All of those, if you will, against the backdrop of changing racial and ethnic demographics in the United States and increasing pandering to racial anxiety. And that, for me, is what distinguishes where we are in the United States today. And I don't want anybody to quote me, but in a way, inequality is not the issue. Inequality is always with us. The issue, it seems to me, is the threshold, the danger, how it comes about, and the segments of the society that face it. So that's why I wanted to distinguish it and come up with the phrase toxic inequality.
And certainly in the post-Civil War era, well, I don't know if this is the case, but the idea that from 1984 to now, we have seen a racial inequality wealth gap increase at that rate seems to me to be, put that in context in American history, because, obviously, when you're talking pre-Civil War, pre-Reconstruction, but I would imagine like the rate of increase over the course of 30 years, that seems to me to be pretty stunning.
It is, and I think there are really two main facets of that, if you will. One is, if as a scholar, if you will, if you were to take the hypothetical question of, all right, so mid-1980s, we're 20 years after major, hard-fought, successful national pieces of civil rights legislation around finances, around housing, around businesses, around access to higher education. One might presume, as some people do, that the United States has become that post-racial society where race has less and less meaning in terms of families and individuals' outcome. But when we put that to the empirical test and ask the question, well, what's happened to the racial wealth gap? If the post-racial society contingent is correct, then whatever legacy, whatever history has delivered at that gap in the mid-1960s should have stayed about relatively equal. The gap shouldn't increase or shouldn't narrow in any one way or another. But the data tell a very different story, literally looking at the same set of families, and that's what's key here, the same set of families. That racial wealth gap grows in inflation-adjusted dollars from $84,000 in 1984 to $245,000 in 2013. And what that represents to me is that when we talk about material racial injustice in the United States, history and that legacy is really critical, but we also have to understand the contemporary drivers of it in terms of policy, in terms of our own continuing institutional discrimination in the United States. And the other part of that is that while that gap grows, the financial wealth of African American families in that same 29-year period does in fact grow. So there's success. It's not as if there's a stalling out, if you will, but the fact is that the wealth of the white community grows so much more quickly that gap actually widens threefold.
And I would imagine that's going to affect purchasing power too on some level, right? Or is that controlled?
Yeah, you're right. It does affect purchasing power very, very greatly.
Okay.
Because we're talking about so-called discretionary income and how that's converted to wealth or not.
So the story that you tell is about intergenerational wealth in some respects. But I imagine over the course, when we're talking about 30 some odd years, is that a function of how much wealth is tied into housing? And it seems to me that there's like sort of it's a combination of both the impact of how you're set up with intergenerational wealth and how so often that wealth is a function of housing, and then what has happened to housing over the past 30 some odd years.
Sure, that's pretty much right on. I think a baseline piece of information here is that for the broad swath of, we can call middle class America, between the 20th and 80th percentile, where most of us are, 2/3 of the wealth of that broad 60% in the middle is in the form of housing equity. It's not the fable that we're taught in Economics 101 about marginal propensities to save and consume and thrift and all that, which is important for sure. But when you're talking about 2/3 of the wealth is in our home equity, that points us to the institutions and the regulations and the financing around home ownership in the United States, and the ways in which families receive help on their down payment, and the ways in which that wealth can be passed along to subsequent generations.
And just broadly speaking, just the way our society sorts itself in some respects, or is helped along to sort itself, like you say, by these policies. And I want to get to some major examples of that historically that have sort of begun that trend. I mean, I had one experience that, where I became sort of aware of the implications of intergenerational wealth, but in a sort of bastardized way. And I don't know. I wanted to get your take on it before we go to some of those policy things, because I had an opportunity to sit on a panel once on a weekend cable show with a guy named Donahue Peebles, who is one of the top, I guess, wealthiest African Americans in the country. And between breaks, we were having an argument about the estate tax. And he was saying that the CBE, the Congressional Black Caucus, CBC, supported, this was back in 2012, I think, going back to either Bush-era estate tax, and he was putting it in the form of, we have finally arrived, speaking of African Americans, we need the ability to pass down our wealth to our through generational. This is a major problem. And I thought, yes, that is a major problem, but it's not going to be solved by just making your family rich, your kids rich. But that is, so he was half right, it seems to me. The solution, though, is more, the estate tax is not going to be one that's going to broadly help everyone, is it?
No, it's not. So we could that rings one of my most passionate bells here, because the estate tax is so symbolic, and the way the current administration and past administrations have monkeyed around with it and tried to get rid of it. So the fact of the matter is, $10.4 million can be passed along tax free from a couple to decedents in any fashion and any form that they desire, literally zero tax on that. And so $10.4 million for an individual, it's like $5.2 million now, and that's indexed to inflation, because we have to protect rich people after all, and their sons and daughters and grandchildren. And even then, the tax I believe is now at a 35% estate tax level, and that's for $1 over the $10.4 million.
Right.
It's not of that $10.4 million. So to begin with, in communities that have not had historical opportunities to acquire and generate and build much wealth in the past, there is still ample opportunity to pass along a huge lot of it to descendants. Now, the second part of that for me is that, who are we talking about in the estate tax? 18 out of every 10,000 deaths in the United States are eligible to pay the estate tax. That's what we're talking about, 18 out of 10,000. And it becomes this huge national issue, which I think, unfortunately, we're about to deal with it once again in the United States under Trump.
All right, so let's go to some of the major policy examples historically. I think, this audience, I hope by now, is aware of the dynamic that took place in launching Social Security, but walk us through that on how that inhibited the wealth of African Americans and Latinos at that time, this, of course, ripples throughout. But then I want you to talk about the tax code broadly and also the Federal Housing Agency.
Yeah, sure. So let me go with the last part first, because I think that's actually key to the setup here. The Federal Housing Act, passed in 1934, implemented in 1935, changed the rules upon which housing could be financed in the United States, and we don't need to maybe go into all that at the moment. But it essentially provided the ability for relatively low-cost loans over a long period of time, 25 to 30 years, and that's what changed the rules on how individual families could buy homes in the United States.
Prior to that, you had to put down, 90%, all of it?
90% in cash, 90% in cash, and come up with the other 5 or 10% on a short-term five-year note that was all due at the end. So it's not a surprise maybe that we also had the Great Depression going on too. So let's not exclude that. It's not surprising then that the home ownership rate in the United States starts to zoom with the post-World War II economic prosperity and the implementation of the Federal Housing Act. And that's how, in my estimation, the broad middle class in America accumulates wealth. It's primarily, as I said before, through housing equity. And that's where the huge amount of net wealth of America's middle class comes from. And so that's about policy. That's about fundamental policy. And we could, I could make the case that it's actually great social policy. It's great public policy, except for that it largely, by custom and by law, excluded African Americans and Hispanics from the opportunity of becoming homeowners in the United States. Residential segregation is still the law of the land in most places at that point in time. We have examples like the Levitt towns, where a number of groups were excluded by custom, and it was written into the title and all that. All right, so the greatest, other than the Homestead Acts perhaps, the greatest property-owning opportunity and wealth-generating opportunities in the United States are closed off. They're blocked to large swaths of minorities in the United States. Social Security is passed about the same time, and this, you mentioned this may be more familiar to your audience, and we're trying to keep lifting this one up. When Social Security is passed, there is historians will argue a little bit, but there's essentially a deal that's made to get the support of Southern Democrats, and the deal is that it will be, quote, and use the air quotes here, it's, quote, universal, except that certain occupations will be excluded, and those occupations were written into the law to be excluded, and they were domestic workers, railroad workers for a different reason, and agricultural and farm workers. And who were they? African Americans and Hispanics. So literally, from mid-1930s, where this so-called universal system is built for senior economic security and disability, and descendants of workers who die too early or get disabled and can't work too early in their lives, that system is built and works pretty well for the most part for those occupations which are filled largely by white workers, white male workers, but doesn't work very well for female workers, for African Americans and Hispanics. It's not until the 1960s, for example, through the great work of Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers, that agricultural workers get reformed and brought into the Social Security structure. So you've got generations now of minority workers that don't have retirement security, which means that there's no protection for any savings they might have built up. They have to spend that in their old age in comparison to other workers that were a great part of the system.
So they have no ability to pass anything on to their children, A. B, their children may in some instances have responsibility to pay for, or to house or to take care of these people to keep them out of poverty. So it inhibits their ability to build wealth. I mean, you
Absolutely.
it's just a ripple that continues through time.
Absolutely. That's, as a sociologist, that's what we call a pattern, a system, a social structure, if you will. The third part that you brought up is in the tax code. And while Social Security and the Federal Housing Act might seem like somewhat distant history, although I'd argue their legacy still is very much alive today, the tax code is very contemporary. And the tax code actively redistributes wealth to the top. And an example, since we're talking about housing, essentially, among other things, let's stick with the example of housing. One of the largest public investments in the tax code is the mortgage interest deduction, which operates in such a way that you're eligible to take the interest you pay on your mortgage off of your taxes. So the higher the tax bracket you're in, the more of the interest that you can take off. The more expensive the home and the mortgage is, the more you can take off. And all of that operates in a way that we invest as a society about $150 billion every single year, not a one-off, but every single year in the mortgage interest deduction and 2 or 3 other items that are very closely related, like not having to pay property taxes, like not having to pay capital gains when you sell your house, for example. All of those amount to about $150 billion every single year. It's one thing, Sam, to think about if that $150 billion were invested as a public good, somewhat democratically, somewhat representative to the demographics in the United States, we might think of it one way. But no, the data tell, again, a very different story. About 86% of that $150 billion every single year goes to the top 10% of income filers. A massive redistribution of wealth to the top. Now, a lot of people don't like the word redistribution, but they don't like it only when those of us on the progressive side, if you will, talk about it in terms of equity. But redistribution, in fact, is what happens every day through the tax code.
So just to be, to recap the sort of dynamic, when we're talking about just housing, which, like you said, accounts for 2/3 of the wealth of people between the 20th and 80th percentile. So essentially, to the extent that we have a middle class in this country, that's what we're talking about. Structurally speaking, you don't have multi-generations of families that have been able to get loans, get the leverage to buy these homes and to step up essentially over time and to hand these down. Plus, on that end, you're then subsidizing the paying off of those loans that these people couldn't get in the first place. So there's really sort of like a double dip here, right? In terms of if you see it as a race or as a climbing up the ladder, if you will, that inhibit just on the financing side alone, right? I mean, this is we're not even talking about the difficulty or the social. And I would like you to talk about this because, and I'd like to also talk a little bit about, the people that you met and your experiences. But, and maybe this is a good jumping off point to talk about how there is a tendency because of people making decisions that are just not as profitable based upon where their families come, insofar as, like, if I'm an African-American professional, go talk about that, because I think you have a case about that in St. Louis.
Yeah, sure. So in Toxic Inequality, we're able to tell the story of a couple of those middle-class and or professional African-American families that face a very, I don't want to say unique, because it's faced by millions of African American and Hispanic professionals and middle class families as well, because of residential segregation and the persistence of residential segregation in the United States, the valuing of equity through home ownership is color coded according to the demographics of a community, so that we know, and there's a very ample both economic and sociological literature around this, that when a home is located in a relatively well-off, say upper middle class, relatively homogeneous white community, no matter the when the home was built, the blades of grass, the square footage, the size of the yard, all that stuff, that home is going to increase in value much more quickly and have a higher ceiling on the value appreciation of that property than if that exact same home, same number of blades of grass, were located in a lower middle class community that's even 50% minority. And the numbers keep going, up or down. You slide them up or down from there. Realtors talk about how's the property valued, and they have the mantra location, location, location. Well, the deconstruct of that is demographics, demographics, demographics.
And we should say too that there's a whole host of factors that are implicated by that, right? I mean, if you're coming from if you're in a neighborhood that is predominantly or even significantly African American, historically you have a lot less political power in that neighborhood, and so you'll see services that are reduced. You'll see schools that aren't as well funded, and these things add to that property value equation.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty clear loop that goes on there. We know, very profoundly confirmed by the study after study after study. There's a very high correlation between community wealth, that is the value of property, the value of homes in a community, and they may not be great measures, but the measure of school quality. It's very high, and so it turns also that it's not just the community wealth that provides more resources, because schools, unfortunately, in my view, are financed 70% or so out of local property taxes, which makes that system extremely inequitable. But the better the school, then the other side of the loop is the better the school, the higher the property value. It becomes an asset for everybody.
Talk a little bit about the myths that are associated with people's understanding of generational wealth and whatnot. I mean, one of the things that I was reminded of I think it was a story about how someone either bought a new house or paid for college, but was Mitt Romney talking about back in the day, like, Ann and I, all we had was a small stock portfolio of $60,000, and just sort of no idea that, like, wow, that's a huge asset to have. Aside from the knowledge that your family can provide that, and the fact that his dad was, head of a major car company and the governor of Michigan. I mean, but talk about how, because this also reminds me of, there's a lot of times we reference the mortgage interest deduction as being part of that submerged state that has been written about, where people don't realize that they are getting government services. There's a sort of similar dynamic that people don't realize that they're getting an intergenerational benefit.
Yeah, so we like to half joke and say denial is more than a river in Egypt. It's easy it's sort of in our character, if you will, to attribute success to our own merit and our own achievements, and make that internal, and to externalize failures to people or institutions or somebody else around us. We did an interesting exercise. I gave a talk last week in Dallas, Texas, and there were a little over 300 people in the audience, and the exercise went this way. We asked people to stand if they were homeowners, and it was largely a middle-aged crowd. It was mixed, but it was sort of predominantly middle-aged. So a lot of people are standing. The person running the exercise, this is just before a presentation I'm about to give, and she's trying to set this up for me. She says, all right, sit down if you received help on your down payment from family. A lot of people sat down. Sit down if you were the beneficiary of a low, a government guaranteed low interest rate. A lot of people sit down. Sit down if you have a college education and your family helped you with tuition. All right, by the end of this, and it didn't go much further, there were literally 4 people left standing in the audience. And what that showed, obviously not a national sample, but the dynamic was one that we get a lot of help,
right,
for especially for home ownership, and that comes through inheritance largely. We tend not to think of help on a down payment as inheritance. We tend only to think of inheritance as something that's passed at the death of a beloved elderly relative. But about 35% of Americans receive $10,000 or more dollars in inheritance over like a 20-year period. And that's a little over a third, so that gives us an idea. And 10,000 may not be a whole lot. It depends where, for Mitt Romney, it may not have been a lot, but I suspect for a lot of the listeners today, it's a lot. But that 35% hides a lot, and what it hides is an extreme racial breakdown, where 46% of whites inherit more than 10,000, and 10% of African Americans. And so that's a 4.6 to 1 ratio, right away. And then even among those African Americans, those 10% that do inherit, on average they inherit $30,000 less than the whites that are also lucky enough to inherit. So it's the history, because wealth can be passed, not like income, not like human capital, not like a lot of other things. One of the reasons that I really like the ability to analyze family wealth is that it is intergenerational, and we can track what is that legacy, what does that history look like from one generation to another. And the data I just gave, I would suggest, is history in motion. It's visiting us today.
Let's talk a little bit just about the relationship between class and race here, and I wonder, if you can also sort of break out for us the disparate impact on wealth building. And I should say also, I'd like to introduce the idea of that or mention your idea of an asset poverty line, so that we can sort of like begin to contemplate these things more than just simply wealth, but understand this. But where does it have more disparate impact between? Because you spoke to people both in poverty and living in middle class, both black and white. Where is the disparate impact? I mean, I think people get the sense of what the answer is, but the disparate impact is that much more?
Sure. So it's our in the social sciences and in the public square, the conversations have been unfortunate in that we talk about sort of material inequality, whether it's male, female, black, white. For a long time, we've landed on individual or family income. I mean, the male, female, 79 cents on the dollar is a perfect example of that, and it tells a good story, but that picture is not complete by any stretch of the imagination, because we've left out that reservoir of resources, that individual or family wealth. So almost all the families we talk to, and this is true nationally as well, we use income essentially to reproduce our daily lives, to pay our rent or our mortgage, put clothing on our back, food, shelter, maybe some discretionary spending on entertainment, on vacations, etc. But the truth of the matter is that most American families are close to zero spending that income on reproducing their daily lives by the end of the month. Now, we spoke to a bunch of families, and if I can recall, I think accurately the phrase, one of the people we talked to said that the month was longer than the paycheck. And that, I think, is a good capture on sort of what happens at the end of the month to a lot of families, both black and white, that are close to that income poverty line at least. It's the family's wealth, though, that provides first protection from the unexpected, from emergencies, whether it's the air conditioning going out in the living unit in the dead of summer, or the car breaking an axle in a pothole in the dead of winter, or someone not being able to cover the hospital bill. There's got to be a reserve to dip into, and that doesn't come out of the weekly or the monthly paycheck. That comes out of savings or the coffee can or under the mattress or wherever it comes from. Wealth then serves a second function, and that's the function where it provides the opportunity to buy opportunities of higher education, home ownership, business development, retirement savings. And that's where we can get into conversation about the what I would call an asset poverty line as an analog to the traditional income poverty line. So when we ask the question, and it's a little, I don't want to say unfair, but the assumptions don't totally hold up. But if we were to ask the question, if a family's source of income was totally disrupted and they had no source of income, how many months could they survive out of their savings at the sheer government traditional poverty line for 3 months? And the answer is only about 40% of American families can. That is, the amount of savings that most American families have is not very much, and we're talking about $10,000 or less here. That's 40% or so of all American families, and that, of course, differs greatly by race and ethnicity.
And how does that play into?
That's how close to the cliff or fragile most American families are. The phrase has now become a little more popular. We're one accident away, we're one emergency away, we're one mishap away from being out of money.
And how does equity in a home play into that in terms of like how you measure equity in it's one thing to not have the cash, let's say, over those 3 months. I'm only asking in terms of because in the context of building generational wealth, it seems to me that even when you don't have some liquid assets, but obviously when you do, like your car breaks down, it's not just a question of can I get the car fixed, it's can I keep my job, right? Because if I can't fix my car, I can't get to my job, and then I've got to get a job, and my opportunities are limited, and then you start to your mobility starts to move the other direction. So it can function, but it also can function beyond that, whereas if I have a cushion, I can go and risk this entrepreneurial opportunity, or I can, maybe risk my current job to go interview for a different job. I mean, there's just a lot more flexibility.
Sure. So there's a family, one of the families we write about in the book, the Ackermans in St. Louis. They both had pretty good jobs. Mr. Ackerman lost his job. He was running communications in 3 cities for emergency services. He was a sort of chief dispatcher and scheduler, and that's the work he did. And he was making pretty good money. He got fired or laid off when the sort of change of political administrations, and he was able to sustain that lack of employment for about 6 months without there being much disruption of the family's well-being, because his wife was still working, and over the years he and his wife had built up through a mandatory retirement system where both of them worked a little over $300,000 in retirement savings. So they had a big cushion, and I frame that, or I think of that. That's the way all American families should be. I don't want to talk about them as being, particularly greatly advantaged because they're white and where they worked, but that's a system that we want to build for everybody,
right?
In that sense, and that kind of protection, and that's pretty unusual these days.
And so, I mean, just speak to that difference, the relationship between class and race here, because that has become particularly right now. Just give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, sure. So when we put wealth into this equation, it really jumbles it up even further, and makes the binary thinking that we tend to be stuck in, race or class, even more perhaps inaccurately framed than it might otherwise be. That's because I think our traditional, our ingrained ways of thinking about class is in the income mode. What we get paid, what the market pays us for the work we do, and that in combination with our education and the kind of job we have, again, really rooted, grounded in the marketplace, where wealth is partially grounded in the workplace, but it's really grounded in maybe more so in property, in ownership, in a different kind of power in that way. So we think of class primarily just through that contemporary market mode, and when we cut wealth in, this is the way I like to phrase it, if you will. If we define class in terms of wealth and not income, we get a very different picture. First of all, you get the huge majority of Americans that are poor, wealth poor, a lower middle class, a very, very little wealth to play with, maybe just that emergency level of wealth, and a pretty tiny minority that are at the top of a very different looking pyramid. In addition, when we intersect the race dynamics, this is the analog that happens here. The wealth of an African American professional, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, is about the same as a skilled white worker. And those are not, if you think in terms of traditional class terms, well, the income of professionals is much greater than skilled workers, especially those that are not unionized. And that gives us, that jumbles up kind of the race class conversation even more. So for me, to come to some historical intersection of race and class is really built on our history, where to some degree it's race that's lifting class up, and they don't mix in quite the same way when we think about financial wealth and family wealth in that way.
So just to be clear, if I am, and obviously broadly speaking, but if I am an African-American doctor, my wealth is more likely to be equivalent to a white factory worker, let's say.
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes.
And
yes.
And that
even though your income can be 2 or 3 times.
And that's because I'm more likely, if I'm the white factory worker, to have inherited either money or a home, or I was given a small stake
Yep.
That I was able to leverage, that okay. I mean that
and the African American professional, we know a higher rate of African American college graduates have student loans, and the student loans they have on average are actually larger. And the cultural part I would throw in here, because it's part of what we learned through interviewing the families and other projects that we work on here, is that when a minority member, whether it's Hispanic, African American, or whatever, when they're the most successful in their network, they tend very much to be the family members that other less fortunate family members call upon for resources in times of need, whether it's helping a niece or a nephew to get to community college. They take care, and we know this through the data, it's absolutely accurate. A higher proportion of African Americans and Hispanics give money to elderly parents and other relatives. And at the end of the day, that makes their wealth look lower, but it's because they've used it for purposes and values that I would suggest are highly appropriate. Where that white person, their other members, it's more spread out.
Right, they don't have the same. They're not called upon to be
not nearly to the same
the
extent.
hero for the family in the same way.
Right.
Right. All right. So the gist of all of this is that these are policy decisions that have been made over the course of generations that have brought us to this point. And you list a bunch of policy recommendations, but pick out the top 2 or 3 that you, if we were living in a slightly different era, could implement, or if you were perhaps maybe just I don't know, king for the week.
Sure. So
and lock
let's
in such a way that they can't be reversed easily.
Yeah, so some kind of sustainability. So you and I get to be king and or queen for the week here.
Thank you.
And what we get to do is that I'll just start with how, because that's the biggest driver. It's also because where most of our conversation has been today. I don't know how many listeners you've got. I assume it's a lot. With a very few exceptions, we could put all of us in a football stadium, and within half an hour, we could redesign the mortgage interest deduction, keeping the $150 billion. I do not want to lose sight of losing that. It's a public good. Let's repurpose it in a way that it actually reaches families that need help on their housing, not just home ownership, but housing stability. We could repurpose and redesign that within a half hour.
And so, I mean, from a political,
we could put a ceiling. Second, third homes could not be eligible.
Okay.
We could make it flat where everybody gets the same amount. There are a bunch of relatively easy things to do in theory.
Well, let me ask you. Let me just, because this is like, you hear a lot about the repeal of it, and then you also hear like that would be there's so many interests that are would guard that specific tax in particular. I mean, because one has to imagine that it would also not just have the impact of repurposing that money, right? Like we're not going to subsidize wealthy people to buy, second house. We're not going to subsidize McMansions and whatnot if we do it there. But it's also going to, in somewhat, I don't think depress is the right word, but it's going to certainly slow the acceleration of the value of the increase in value on these homes, right? Because so much of the way people approach buying a home is a function of that monthly payment. And that monthly payment is calculated, I mean, I think particularly for more sophisticated, and wealthier people who have an accountant to do this. Like, okay, your loan is going to be, I don't know, $1,500 a month, but in fact, it's really going to be $1,200 a month, and that's going to be cheaper than your rent or something, right?
That's what the realtor does when the realtor tells you how much the home is going to cost per month, and you say that I can't swing that in the budget. That's the first thing the realtor does. Is remember, you're in the 36% tax bracket, so this is the interest you pay, and 36% of that you're going to get back at tax time, and that's the way it's kind of sold.
And then that increases the cost of the house, right? Because your monthly payments are that much lower.
That's correct. So I would, we're just at the point of starting to do some modeling on this. So I'm going to be, unfortunately, a little speculative. I can't cite the data at this point. I'm pretty well convinced that the data and the evidence will show that there will be no decrease in the rate of home ownership at all. In fact, there might even be an increase. It will be a shift of the balance where more affordable home ownership will happen at the expense, if you will, of the McMansion. So
the expense of people buying a house and anticipating it's going to have like a 30. I mean, I live in New York, so obviously like I'm skewed as to what happens with housing. But there's been this perspective over the past, I don't know, 20 years or so that like you buy a house and this is like you're buying, I don't know, it's better than a lottery ticket on some level. Like this is going to increase at like 12% a year or something. And that just won't happen, but it'll still be cheaper maybe than renting in some instances.
Well, so I think what's going to happen is it's not going to increase at 12% a year, but it might increase at 10% a year. The house you buy will be the market will make it a little cheaper because the federal check, the federal subsidy won't be there on the high end as much. So that's where the impact is going to occur. There's going to be zero. It's not going to affect construction jobs at all. It's not going to affect the number of real estate agents or mortgage brokers at all. It may well be, though, that those that sell homes at the high end are going to pay a bit of the price, and they've been benefiting for decades now because of the way the tax code advantages the wealthy on this. So I'm not about that. It's not going to cost. I don't think it's going to cost any jobs in that sense. But there are stakeholders who are going to imagine, and some rightly so, that their incomes are going to be impacted a bit, but not the jobs. And I've not done. I don't have all the information yet. But the state of Oregon had before it, and still does, a reform proposal to reform the state pass-through on the mortgage interest deduction, and it has generated a lot of opposition from the real estate industry and from some of the other stakeholders in it that are lessons for how to frame and narrate a reform and repurposing on this. What we need is, we've got $150 billion of public investment in there, and we need a shift in our portfolio investment. And see how I got around saying the word redistribute there?
Well, it's not such a bad word around these parts, but I understand the trepidation. All right, so one more. Give me one more sort of top line.
All right, so yeah. So this is, I don't want to say 30,000 foot high, but this is really macro equity. We're talking about the mortgage interest deduction. I'm of an age, and I've been, fighting these battles long enough that if I'm going to fail, it needs to, in my mind, it's got to be heroic failure. So I'm going at the biggest pot here. But I also want us to think real seriously about individual families and their mobility and how much smaller amounts can be big changes in their lives. So another favorite of mine is a program called Family Self-Sufficiency. And those that are not familiar with family self-sufficiency, it works in the following way. Those families receiving rent subsidies or in public housing pay the amount of rent based on their earnings. The more your paid earnings go up, the higher your rent goes. So there's a disincentive of sorts here. What family self-sufficiency does for those in the program who successfully completed at the end of 5 years, instead, and I'm going to oversimplify, but this is the way it works. Instead of your rent going up, when your paid earnings go up, and that's the key. It's a work inducement program at the end of the day. When your paid earnings go up, your rent won't go up. Instead, that money is put into an escrow account with your name on it. So, and that account can be large. We evaluate one of the programs here in the New England area, and within the first 3 months where we started looking at this program, one family walked out with a check of $18,000. They walked out of public housing and used that as a down payment on a home in the sort of the Boston metropolitan area, and that may be I don't know how extreme it is. But it's a really good example. And that $18,000, that it was a single mom. She earned that. That was her increase in earnings over the 5 years. And this program is only about 5% of capacity. That is, those enrolled in it, and it's got to be through a local housing authority. I don't want to get overly wonky here, but only about 5% nationally of those that are eligible to be in a program like that are currently in it. And so this is an example of a real, I think, game changer, potentially for those families.
Just to be clear that I understand it, as your income, if you're living in public housing, as your income increases, you are charged, I guess, a higher rent, but the balance between what your rent was and what your rent is actually put into essentially a savings account for you.
Yes, an escrow account, okay. But your rent doesn't go up.
Right. Okay.
In lieu of it going up, that money is put into an escrow account with your name on it.
But you do pay the money from your income.
No.
So wait.
No, the money that goes into that is from Department of Labor, I believe. It's the department where the program is housed.
So it is a payment that is equivalent to what the rent increase would be?
Yeah, so the housing authority gets the increase in rent, but you actually don't pay the increase.
And it's tax dollar program?
That's correct.
Okay, I see.
That's correct. I mean, it's real dollars. You know, that check is real at the end of the day for those that complete it.
Great. All right. Well, I think I understand, but that sounds like an interesting program. Well, nevertheless, fascinating research, and I hope that maybe 10 years down the road, there'll be another a check-in on these families, because it's fascinating to see that trajectory and sort of overlay that with what we know of national data. Thomas Shapiro, the book is Toxic Inequality, How America's Wealth Gap Destroys Mobility, Deepens the Racial Divide, and Threatens Our Future. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and take care.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. Going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will have fun half and fun. You can support this program by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Once you become a member, you will be a member. And when you are a member, you'll be supporting this program. You'll be supporting this free part of the program. And then, as a way of saying thank you, we give you bonus material every day that is often as large, if not larger, than the free material. And a different ilk, a little more fun. Still, sometimes some serious stories. Sometimes we have phone calls. The calls that we had yesterday were I would
bizarre.
Say, no, not bizarre. Like in the Pantheon,
no,
right?
They were. We had great calls yesterday.
We had
the
Ronald Reagan.
Call, Ronald Reagan, always classic. We had the call.
Did John from San Antonio call?
John with revelations about his clothing habits.
Mindy called. I mean, it was
and
like
then the guy calling in as the Metropolitan Police
there
Inspector.
Was I thought for a moment I was going to get arrested. But.
And people also want to know why we didn't have the courage to ask Professor Shapiro about the Seth Rich murder.
We'll get that on the next guest. I know. I chickened out. I was going to call him to court on that. So, folks, there's all sorts of fun, crazy things that happen in the fun half. And you can join us by just joining the Majority Report at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. Get 10% off. Also, if you buy your crap from Amazon or jet.com, you want to support the show, but you don't want to expend anything other than you normally expend, simply go to majorityreportkickback.com, click through those links, use them to purchase your goods on those sites, and we get a kickback. Thus, we call it majorityreportkickback.com. 646-257-3920 is the number, 646-257-3920. Programming note, tomorrow on the program, Cliff Schechter and my buddy Larry Murphy. Larry Murphy, the sound of the voice, I should say, of Teddy on Bob's Burgers, and a bunch of other ones. Also, famously, Assy McGee from the show Assy McGee, where if you go to my IMDb page, you'll see that I played the douche on that show. But
you're sure did, Rachel.
Larry is a funny guy who also who's one of those guys who's like constantly texting me now about politics. His utter disgust and loathing of Donald Trump, I think, may be unrivaled. I don't know if he'll express it in the same way as Judy Gold, but it's pretty serious. All right, we got to take a quick break. Be right back after this. Wow, there we go. That one. That's not even the Yugoslavian one yet, folks. Now, of course, members have no idea what I'm referencing. Sometimes
I was just going to say I was going to keep it in for him.
Yeah, that's the way we do it, folks. If we switch it to a new song, we keep it in just so you can hear it. So don't send the emails complaining. We just do it every now and then. Not even every time Matt changes it. Just every time we introduce a new one, we do it once just so you get a taste of what you're missing. When we get the new site going and we get into a new process, can we put all this stuff on Spotify or on a YouTube playlist too? Might be good.
I can do Spotify. I sort of have an unofficial Spotify playlist, but we can do it.
We should do a Majority Report's Spotify playlist. There's no reason not to. I don't know that the returns on that are huge, but
very savvy use of time, Rachel.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is it's always sad when you see former friends fight so viciously in public. I mean, there was a time, and I am thinking of course, what's going on here? Why isn't my
Board just isn't responding?
Yeah, what happened? Did you shut this off before, Matt? No. This is what happens when you let people come into your studio and do the stuff. All of a sudden.
We're just playing around with the board.
Nothing works.
Just to see.
Hold on. How do I do this? Oh. All right, it's not working. My board is not working. I'm not happy about it. I am not happy about it. I'm going to have to relaunch it. We're going to have to start this over again.
Do you want to just take a call while you relaunch it?
Yeah, let's
reset
take a call.
The story.
And then, I'll do the story in a second. All right, you're calling from a 360 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Veronica. I'm from Washington State.
Hello, Veronica. What's on your mind today?
I just wanted to share a little story about how intergenerational wealth has helped me, even as a kind of poor white person.
Okay, please do.
About 7 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and I had to quit my job, start taking care of her, take care of her in her home for many, many years. I have my own children. I'm 34. I've developed more children over the time of taking care of my mom, of course. And she has passed now, but I would have never been able to take care of her without the fact that she owned a home and there was a place to take care of her. And when I had to put her into care, I got to keep that home.
Mm.
And just there's so many people in a similar situation to me that didn't have that backup of a place to live, a place to care for their family. And it makes my life work.
Yeah, I mean,
I just can't imagine.
And sometimes it's a small contribution to a down payment on a house. Sometimes it can be a contribution to going to college, and it's also just sort of like where people tend to live. I mean, if you have a community that is that is not consistently been redlined or whatnot, there's more opportunity for the value of that house to accrue over the years.
Exactly. Like, I don't think that my house is accruing much value, but the county sure thinks so, so that's good.
Well, you see your taxes going.
But I've called him before a while back. I really liked your show a lot. I just wanted to share that little story. And also, I know you're not talking about Medicaid today, but Medicaid has saved my ass through this whole process as well.
Because your mom's in a nursing home, and we know about 60% of people.
She was in a nursing home.
60% of people in a nursing home are there because Medicaid's paying for it.
Indeed, and Medicaid didn't actually pay that much for her because she was actually getting Social Security income. But just the fact that there's somebody in the house. Well, hold on a second. Sorry. Medicaid wasn't paying that much for her, but the fact that she was on Medicaid made that the nursing home had to take less.
Right. I see. Interesting.
That was a big thing. And also, I have 3 kids. All of my children were born on Medicaid. Like, I'm on Medicaid right now. My children are on Medicaid, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate the call.
So,
I mean, it points out the sort of the transcendent racial aspect of this on some level as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Thanks.
How's the state of the board?
I don't know. We'll
Has the
check
board
it right
returned?
Now. Let's see. No.
Oh,
don't
damn.
work. Well, it's just sometimes it acts up. I'll have to relaunch it. All right. Well, nevertheless.
We should do it regardless.
Nevertheless, yes. I mean, maybe you can just play some, give me a little bit of love story behind here, if you could. Ladies
That's your
and gentlemen.
glow, too.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always sad when former friends fight. And it's always super sad when former friends fight this viciously. However, it's super fun when the former friends happen to be Donald Trump and Mika and Joe. So here is Donald Trump apparently responding to, and he claims he no longer listens to or watches Morning Joe, right? And apparently, though, he does a little bit, or he hears about it because he was mad at Mika and Morning Joe. So in a series of tweets this morning, I don't know what time this was at. I believe it was around 8:30. So
I'm up bright and early and ready to make a point.
the Morning Joe people, I don't think had an opportunity to react on their show. But Donald Trump writes, let's see. I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me. Parens don't watch anymore. That cuts like a knife, ladies and gentlemen. I can tell you, believe me, when I get tweets like that too, like heard you shilled for somebody, don't listen anymore. And then he writes, how come low IQ crazy Mika, along with Psycho Joe, came ... to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights, and I'm moving into the next tweet, 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me. And you
Can
recall,
we just say something right now? Until we get to the next part, he's on totally solid ground right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, he's legit.
Look, let's be honest. I think we did even like a video talked about like it's not appropriate for them to go down to Mar-a-Lago and try and get into the New Year's party. They were hanging around there. Remember that? I remember that specifically. And it is a little bit ironic, and maybe part of it is because Trump won't go on their show. Who knows why they're having this fight? But certainly they were desperate to ingratiate themselves. But then Donald, of course, always has to take it a little too far by revealing in this next instance, she was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no. So apparently, he said, you can't come to my party because your face is bleeding from your facelift.
People are trying to enjoy themselves, Mika. Isn't it enough that they have to deal with your low IQ?
It totally put me off the ball drop
Totally
with that
crazy.
bleeding mouth of yours.
Hey, let's usher in the new year. Oh, I'm sorry. My children are terrified because Mika has a bleeding face.
Now, then Mika tweeted out this little thing. And this is not a video, right? This is this is a picture of a Cheerios box. I don't know if this is like a Cheerios box that she had in her house or just an ad, but it says made for little hands on the thing. So obviously making fun of Donald Trump's little hands. She might feel constrained by journalistic ethics to not say anything, just to replicate a picture. It is perfectly within journalistic norms to go and attempt to go get invited to a New Year's party to hang out with the president-elect. But
Look. People don't understand this. Eric gets scared very easily. He doesn't know what the hell's going on with Mika. She looks like an insane clown, okay? And that's only for adults. And people always, with the bleeding, they say I was insulting Megyn Kelly. A lot of women are bleeding for a lot of different reasons.
That's right.
It's totally unfair.
Now, so that was the exchange. Very, very sad indeed. I hope certainly they can all make up. Now, with that said, what's worse? I don't know what's worse. We just spoke about how these three folks are having a fight between themselves. But what's worse, and I know this, my daughter is in middle school. Sometimes then other people get pulled into it, right? And so here is poor Sarah Huckabee Sanders having to go on to Fox News to talk about the fight that Mika and Joe and Donald are having. I mean, it's so sad. Everybody gets caught up into it. And you know what probably also going on? They're in a group chat, and I bet one or two of them got knocked off and blocked, and that's the worst thing that can happen with these guys.
What is the White House saying about why that went out today?
Look, I don't think that the president's ever been someone who gets attacked and doesn't push back. There have been an outrageous number of personal attacks, not just to him, but to, frankly, everyone around him. People on that show have personally attacked me many times. This is a president who fights fire with fire and certainly will not be allowed to be bullied by liberal media and the liberal elites within the media or Hollywood or anywhere else.
There you go. The old classic, he's fighting fire. It's all the liberal elites. I mean, frankly, look, I think hopefully some of these people are learning that you can't get too close to Donald Trump. I mean, remember when Donald Trump, why would Mika and Joe be even somewhat surprised by this? Does everybody remember when Donald Trump got up and gave out, what was it, Lindsey Graham's phone number?
Oh, that was awesome.
This is a guy who obviously, and this is his brand, frankly. I'm going to screw him all over. What difference? You come back in.
Well, I think in their case,
good.
they're doing the same thing. I mean, they operated, it was complete mutual cynicism the whole time, and it continues. Like, I don't think there's any victim here.
No.
I didn't start anything with the wife.
You didn't start anything with the wife?
Hey, Sarah, great job. Have you ever considered bleeding out of your face?
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, as the President of the United States tweets out about how his former favorite news host's wife had a facelift that was bleeding when she was attempting to ingratiate herself to him at his Mar-a-Lago New Year's. There's a darker problem that is going on, and that is that the NRA is under attack. Dana Loesch took it upon herself to cut this ad. Listen to the terminology, the language which assassinates. Remember, this is coming from an organization, basically the trade organization for the gun industry, which produces a product meant to shoot other people. Or things, to be fair. But listen to the language, because, what do you do when you're one of these, when you are out there hawking every type of weapon to be sold? What do? You must create a threat, and that is the threat of language, ladies and gentlemen.
They use their media to assassinate real news. They use their schools to teach children that their president is another Hitler. They use their movie stars and singers and comedy shows and award shows to repeat their narrative over and over again. And then they use their ex-president to endorse the resistance, all to make them march, make them protest, make them scream racism and sexism and xenophobia and homophobia, to smash windows, burn cars, shut down interstates and airports, bully and terrorize the law-abiding, until the only option left is for the police to do their jobs and stop the madness. And when that happens, they'll use it as an excuse for their outrage. The only way we stop this, the only way we save our country and our freedom is to fight this violence of lies with the clenched fist of truth. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
With the clenched fist of truth. And also the weapons we're selling. The only way we fight these lies is through the clenched fist of truth, which is clenched around, incidentally, maybe an AR-14 or maybe just a handgun.
Fire.
Remember, Dana Loesch, you may remember her from back in the day. She was the one, and this is a clip from when we played from her back in 2015. This is her doing her best, I think, Jimmy Dore impersonation, when she was talking about to Peter Schweitzer, the guy who wrote the Clinton Cash book, which ended up being used by FBI agents in New York, the New York office, to basically put out, I don't know if people remember this, but like a week or two before the election, they went over all this. We're reopening an investigation based upon what we found in Clinton Cash, the book that had been out for 2 years. It just so happened that that investigation apparently did not reopen. But here, Dana Loesch is talking to Peter Schweitzer, saying that she's surprised that he hasn't been. Well, she used the name of a person as a verb, and I had to explain to the youngins in this office what she was talking about. But here is this is what was going on in the fever swamps. And of course, this is we got a president out of it. But everybody who listens to Dana Loesch knows what she's talking about here. Listen to this.
More on the terror attack in Garland, Texas last night. I'm glad that they had security, well thought out security for that event. And I was reading an article just the other day where author Peter Schweitzer, whose new book, Clinton Cash, and this book is really making a lot of people uncomfortable. Clinton Cash, the untold story of how and why foreign governments and businesses helped make Bill and Hillary rich. I was reading the other day that Peter Schweitzer, the author who joins us by phone right now, was very smart and ended up getting himself security. And I know that, Peter, first off, thanks so much for joining me. I know you don't want to talk too much about it, but there is always that concern for anyone who goes up against the Clinton machine that they could be Vince Fostered. And I'm sure that was something that you took into consideration.
Well, Dana, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I always love doing it. Yeah, I mean, look, there are security concerns that arise in these kinds of situations. You know, you don't like to go into too much detail.
Yeah, I'm going to ignore the fact that you just claimed that the Clintons murdered Vince Foster. And what did they do?
Drag the body to the park. I begged Hillary. I said, Vince is on his way out anyways. We don't need to kill him. He's not going to talk. He just wants to go back to Arkansas and get treated for his depression. I mean, he was hurting so bad. But my wife insisted that he needed to be taken out, and something a little bit inside me died that way. You know, I'm asexual, too. My wife forces me to have affairs, rape. Everything, every single thing that I have done has been a part of her master plan, which you shill for every day. Not a word about the DNC lawsuit or Kim.com.
All right, well.
Have some integrity.
A couple of the other clips here. We all get really fun half stuff today. Apparently, there's a guy who is, I don't know if you ever saw that Andy Kaufman, I'm From Hollywood documentary, where Andy Kaufman became a wrestler and would just go in and taunt people in the South. I'm from Hollywood. You people are scum, and it was actually pretty funny. Well, now there's
It'd be great if Obama started. He just did it towards like
as a wrestler,
or just in general. Like he actually did. Like we do Nation of Islam Obama, but he just started the South. It's like, you people make me sick. You disgusting white hillbillies. I went to Harvard.
That was you should see. It's
Where's
actually
the
very
arugula?
Funny.
Oh wait, it's not around here because you're at brain damage.
There is a wrestler who has adopted the moniker the progressive liberal, and he wears like a full Hillary Clinton thing and apparently runs around the ring and yelling at the people out there, feel the burn, feel the burn. So he's not ideologically.
He's a unity Dem.
Yeah, he's not, he's not ideologically pure. He's more of like a unity Democrat, a liberal progressive.
I love the Hillary shirt. Although how cool would it be if he was up there? He's just like, they robbed us of Keith Ellison. We've got to fight the establishment.
Yeah, but he's not trying to. He's basically part of the resistance, and he knows who's fighting. He's not torn.
He's
not
more
ambivalent.
sophisticated than many YouTube channels.
It's true. It's true. Obviously corporatist because of it, but here he is, and we have some clip of some of his taunting. Right? Is that what it is? He's doing.
Yes, he's taunting the audience before a match.
He doesn't. I don't think he's quite. We don't have old Matt here to give us an assessment of this, but I don't think he's quite hit the big time yet in the wrestling world. But here he is, in what appears to be a high school gym, but it is set up for a wrestling match. Here, let's listen.
I want to say I was sitting out there in the back and I was listening to that feller strum his little guitar, and I understand now why you all identify with country music. It's slow and it's simple and it's boring, just like each and every one of you. Listen, I'm just here to deliver the truth. No need to get hostile. What you say? Oh, you say that with the 5th grade education, man? It's very obvious that we're in a red state. A red, right-wing, bigoted state. Because last month, the fix was in on the progressive liberal Daniel Richards.
The thing that's sort of disturbing about
really
this,
are really annoying, aren't we? 'Cause that's a really good impression.
This is the conservatives would argue this is why Donald Trump won. Everything that this guy is representing is exactly how liberals sound to these people. And there's probably some measure of truth of it. Probably something.
Hey, you mouth-breathing fools.
Wait, now we're getting it again.
I guess that wasn't a new button. The twist ties made me think it was new to the packaging, but it must be one of the broken ones.
Maybe there's some other problem with maybe the microphone or the cables.
But it could be.
Yeah.
I just like to say that
You're lucky I don't have my soundboard. I would have given you the Perry Mason right there.
I just like to say
Good
that
job,
there were
Sherlock.
about maybe 20 people in that audience, tops, that you could tell. And
That's not so small, though. Like, that stuff has a following.
They're recording it for video, so that's probably the use of it. But I'm saying, there are probably 20 people in the audience. He's using a fake persona, and a woman is screaming at the top of her lungs so angrily about what he's saying.
I think what you can glean from that is that, A, it's quite possible that liberals sound that way to these people, and B, it's probably pretty justified relative to their response. I probably don't realize you're just putting it on to get a rise out of me.
Right.
I'll kill you. I paid $20 to see you make fun of me.
It's the perfect heel, though.
Look, I get it. It's like, people do that. People go down to the Comedy Cellar here to go down, and they pay money, and they sit in the front row, and they hope the comedian will make fun of them. But they don't walk out of there and go like, I'm going to vote to make sure that the earth is fried up because I hate comedians. Come on.
People hope for that?
What?
People hope for that at comedy shows?
There's some people who go and buy them and get picked on.
Every
sure.
time that I've gone to a comedy show.
Do you sit in the front row?
No.
Do you speak up?
No, I do not. And I always get picked on. And I hate it.
I got to think that's
I might be laughing really loud.
Maybe that's not a coincidence.
What did I do?
I don't know. I haven't been there, but I mean,
But I dread it, and I try to just
I would not go to the comic.
look away. I don't.
Still not working. Oh, we have another iPad that is bricked. Son of a gun. I don't know what you guys did to my iPad.
Great job, white people.
My pen was missing.
Really?
Yeah.
It was on the desk.
But it was still misplaced.
All right. Let's go to I'll play one more clip here of should we do the Alexa Jones or
Sure,
Alex
do
Jones?
the whole thing. But did you check the IM 250?
I'm still upset about the Dana Loesch NRA.
That was pretty
ad.
disturbing.
That was very disturbing.
It's part of their core brand proposition.
Let's talk about. All right. Well, I think you covered the other day, right? The story of a St. Louis police officer.
We did not cover this.
Oh, we didn't.
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, here is. I guess this happened. I don't know, sometime last week, but an African American police officer, off duty, I believe, was surrounded at one point by other police officers who thought that he was a perpetrator. They got him to go down on the ground, and he must have pulled out like a ID or something and lifted it up and said, "I'm a cop. I'm a cop." They told him to get up, and then another white St. Louis police officer shot him, thinking that he was a perpetrator. I mean, that just like
the
so
cop who shot was newer to the scene.
Right. So here
Right there, guys. I'll kill the disabled black guy now.
Here is the African American off-duty cop's attorney, and this quote. It's hard to sort of contextualize this, but it gives you a sense of just like what the black experience is when it comes to police officers. Here's the attorney.
This happens to be the first time in the national discourse that we're aware of a black professional or a law enforcement officer himself being shot or treated as an ordinary black guy on the street.
Yeah. Like, he just got shot for no reason other than he was black. And generally, this just happens to normal black guys, not to guys who, because, you know, what this moment does, though, it certainly puts it highlights the lie that we heard for an extended period of time about why these shootings are taking place, right? Like, you've got to show respect. Show respect for a police officer. Here's a guy who knew, because he was a cop himself, every single, not only how to be respectful theoretically with police officers, but what protocol was. And still he gets shot.
I think being black is disrespectful to police officers.
In some respects. Yeah. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 206 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam to Sandy Heyman in Seattle.
How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. So, you know that NRA ad, so that wasn't about Philando Castile and his right to bear arms? I'm confused.
Yeah, no, it was about you've got to fight lies with the solid fist of truth.
Yeah, raised in the air. I was just calling today. I just wanted to. I work in the labor movement out here in Seattle, and that study that came out, it's total BS because employers are like they're screaming for employees everywhere, and they can't get people in. They're paying way above minimum wage. People are asking for less hours in a lot of places because they're being asked to work so much overtime because unemployment's so low. So. Yeah, it seems like it's a good old boys network kind of study that ignored a major part of the of the workforce up here. So
I mean,
I
sometimes
just don't
I'd
want
be
people to
more
buy into
curious.
that
I mean,
crap.
look, it came out of some researchers from the University of Washington. I'd be more curious to hear about who those folks were. But I also think that like people should probably reserve judgment on it until it's peer reviewed, because a lot of times what you'll do is, you know, you'll put out a study like this, and by the time it gets peer reviewed, it's not in the news anymore, and people find like, oh, well, there's some significant problems and flaws with this methodology, but that narrative is out there. But the fact of the matter is that we know that unemployment is at an all-time low, and we know that there's been, you know, that wages have not gone down. So I don't know. We'll see. But it sounds very suspect to me. But go ahead.
Yeah, it does. And it just, I mean, when employers are coming and asking union reps if they have anyone who got terminated recently, they're desperate for people. Okay.
Interesting.
So it's kind of crazy.
Appreciate the call.
All right.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah,
Bye.
no problem. Have a good one, man. Bye.
You too. Calling from a 330 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Ryan from Ohio.
Hey, Ryan. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk to actually Michael about a topic from Monday.
Sorry.
Just call the next time I'm in the chair.
What is
okay.
what is the topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess you could ask.
What's the topic? Let's see how long it is.
Okay, I wanted to talk about. So we were talking about Sam Harris and the IQ being predicted. Well, hold on, I'm not here to defend Sam Harris.
I'm just messing with you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and he says IQ is predictive of your future, etc. And then Charles Murray saying that race can be predictive of IQ. And I wanted to know, do you think that affluence is predictive of attitude?
I don't get the question.
He's saying...
do you think if somebody's born with a trust fund, that they are predisposed to being a bad person?
Predisposed to being a bad person?
Yeah.
No. I think
or possibly xenophobic, to be more precise.
Okay. I guess I can go. I mean, it would be better for me to go over this when I'm hosting. But when you do things in a list, that doesn't mean that all of the things are the same thing, right? So, like when Sam makes fun of Frank Luntz and he says he's ethically and follically challenged, he's talking about two different categories and connecting them. He's making a shot at his personal appearance, and then he's also more broadly saying he's an unethical person. He's not exactly saying that because you're, you have that situation that you're unethical, right? So you're talking about a stream of things. And the reason that, and there is actually a lot of research. You could look at Daniel Goleman. Actually, I interviewed him a couple years ago about inequality and emotional intelligence and lack of empathy. There definitely is predictive research on your economic status and your decision making and your sense of entitlement and things like that. That's what actually you were talking about in the interview today, in some respects, about toxic inequality. But the point of the trust fund stuff is twofold, really briefly. One is that when we talk about certain people like a Mitt Romney and we say that they're successful in a vacuum, that's really problematic. It's important to be reminded of how they got successful. And then number two is just it's an important reminder, and it's a shot at somebody. And if it's necessary for me to say this, it sounds weird to say, but I have friends that are trust fund babies.
Well, that's the thing.
It
isn't
sounds
this
odd,
hashtag not all trust funds?
Yes,
and it's
exactly.
not. And look, I think usually the term trust fund baby, right, is different than saying people who have trust funds. Right? I mean, I think the idea is
in the descriptor.
I think the idea is that there is it's not all trust fund recipients of trust funds. It is probably like a trust fund baby, right?
It's literally it's literally in the description. But I'll do an interview on it because there is actually really important.
Really?
No, it's an important topic. It's a relevant topic.
Just to clarify.
But go ahead and look up the Daniel Goleman stuff.
Hold on. He wants to clarify, and then we're going to go.
No, but seriously, look up the interview with Daniel Goleman. It's really good.
Okay, just to clarify, I fucking hate rich people. I just thought Kelly could use somebody in her corner.
Okay.
I think
appreciate the call.
Okay.
Calling from a 530 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is John from Davis, California.
Hello, John. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just want to talk about something that just occurred to me. I actually teach classics, and I know Michael is actually contemptuous of all things that have to do with the classical world. I can forgive that, I guess. But
Wait,
at any
what?
rate, I was teaching a course on ancient Greece the other day, and something really disturbing happened. I had a group.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you did. But I was teaching a class on ancient Greece, a couple of days ago, and I was discussing the distinction between oligarchy and democracy, which is a really fundamental thing in the notion of studying Greek history. And I was amazed to discover there were 30 bright students in the class. No one really had any notion that, by traditional political analysis, the Republicans are the party of oligarchy in this country, and the Democrats are the party of democracy. I mean, they were like, they made no connection between the Republican Party and politics that favor the rich. And it was just kind of shocking to me and disturbing to me. And it indicates to me that the Democrats are not communicating something very fundamental about our politics to people today.
What do your students perceive the difference between Democrats and Republicans?
It is not clear to me. I mean, for me, this is what I was raised with, the notion that, the Republicans are the party of the rich, the Democrats are the party of the poor, and they sort of like play the middle class. The middle class goes one way or the other, depending on its mood. And I don't know. It's interesting. I didn't really ask so much as I was just so shocked to discover that these students had no notion of that.
I'd be curious as to what they perceive the difference. I mean, look, there's an argument I could see, it would be far more encouraging for, half your class saying, oh, well, traditionally speaking, the Democratic Party is represented, less moneyed interests, and the Republicans have, represented more moneyed interests. And, some student stands up and says, well, that may be the case, but let's not give the Democrats too much credit. There's certainly large swaths of the party that at different times have been representative of moneyed interests. But, even that would have been, at least there would have been a debate as opposed to just like, I'm just curious what they think of the distinctions. That's what I would be curious about. I bet my guess, and it would be, I would love it if you asked and then let us know. But my guess it would be that Republicans it's more defined on social issues and maybe civil rights issues. The Republicans are white, anti-gay, anti-immigrant, anti-brown people, black people. That would be my guess for people of that age. But it's it's also indicative of the Democrats really not, even though historically, right? It's not like this has been the forefront of the way they've been running races as of late. And by that, I mean even like 20 years.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, one thing I will say is one person did sort of pipe up, and her perception is that basically all politicians are corrupted by money.
Right.
And that she seemed to think the Democrats were equally contaminated by money, which makes sense to me. I mean, but it just strikes me the Democrats have got to come out and start talking about the real major issues, which are issues of class.
Well, of
I
course,
hate to say class struggle.
Of course, and it's not just it's not just a question of messaging. I mean, I think there is a reason. We saw Jennifer Palmieri come on, right, on Meet the Press. I hate to harp on this but it's just so illustrative. In February, saying that the resist movement, and she was the former spokesperson, I think, for Hillary Clinton, and I don't know that she's representative of anything, but she's representative of herself, and she's a voice that's out there, and she's certainly, I'm sure, represents a part of the Democratic Party. How much, I don't know, but she's out there arguing that the resistance is not ideological. It is more based on identity politics, and I'm not, please don't mistake what I'm saying about the idea of, marriage equality or civil rights or protection of immigrants. I don't dismiss that by saying that's identity politics, but this is what her language was, and I think that's indicative of at least a large strain of thought in the Democratic Party that you don't talk about class, that we're not here to talk about economic issues. We may have policies about it, but it's not the first foot we're going to put forward. So I don't know. I'd be curious to find out what your class said about that. But look, you're the teacher. I don't want to screw up your curriculum. I appreciate the call.
No. Well, the weird thing is it's so funny because politics have become, when I was younger, I was very, very sort of out there with my politics in my classes. There has been a genuine chill over the last couple decades about what I feel safe saying in class. It's really
I would
kind
just
of
make it a
strange.
question rather than saying anything. I mean, I appreciate that.
I also think you should reach out to David Rubin. I'm sure he would really like to support you in having a more open classroom.
I get a jump. I'll talk to you. Thanks.
Exactly.
All right. Uchi Wally. Christ, man, this interview today hits home. I'm Black. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on sick family and helping other family members out when they have emergencies. Sad to see evidence that my story is not unique. I love Sarah Palin. Just wanted to attack Kelly really quickly. I think she has Stockholm Syndrome because dating back to her time in middle school when rich mean girls let her sit at their lunch table a couple of times. Kelly, it's a joke. I'm glad Trump is going to the old classics of attacking news anchors. His latest material of Obama colluding with the Russians just isn't doing it for me.
Yeah, it's weak material.
I'm happy now. Sam, how is it what the Koch brothers are doing is not treason? I did a search today, and nobody sees it that way. Love today's and Tuesday's interviews. The Kochs are attempting to overthrow democracy. No? Well, I mean, there's been very anti-democratic strains in our politics forever. I think you could argue it's un-American.
That through line of John C. Calhoun, James Buchanan to the Koch brothers it's pretty linear, and it's obviously fundamentally anti-democratic. It's built on defending slavery and foreign and domestic policy.
Well, you call it slavery, but it could also just be a jobs program.
Right. Well, yeah.
Epish. When my dad lost his manufacturing job at age 47 in 91 and never got it back, my mom was able to get a more stable job outside of Milwaukee that required driving through several municipalities that were notorious for police harassment. Those municipalities refused to have accessible public transportation for similar reasons. Growing up in just about the only integrated neighborhoods in Milwaukee, that is simply not an option for other families who can't cross that color line. Some friends of mine hear white privilege and classhole bastards like Tim Wise lecturing them and ask, how the hell is this privilege? I tell them, as bad as all working people have had it since the 60s, it can be so much worse. But this perspective is a function of actually knowing and growing up around Black people. Not everyone has the privilege of that experience. I sent that Christina, who's actually American, ZE Records La Poupée version. She's American. Got a nice Tropicalia influence there. I sent you guys maybe a year ago or so to you guys. Great version, very funny. Daniel Richards sounds like Tim Wise. Maybe he'll do a TED Talk. That's what you do at wrestling, which is about as diverse of a fan base as you'll find in American mass culture. I'm left-wing as it gets, and I'd start yelling, too. It's funny and fun. My mom hates Rachel Maddow because Maddow insulted the Ozarks. Said that an educated Missourian was an oxymoron. Talk about poisoning the well.
I'm Rachel Maddow. I have Russia and Ozark material.
Ivana, I got into an argument with a guy on Twitter who said wealth inequality is a myth and that it's only you who's holding you back and making more money.
He was right.
Wanted colleges in America to be private and not allow any degrees to be given if you don't have the money to pay off the loans with your wages. I let him know how well he'd be if public defenders never existed. FYI, average debt for a law degree is $140,000, and their average wage is $60,000. What do you call this kind of absent thinking? Can I just call him a moron? Yes.
Yes.
Death Camp for Culox. Hey, Sam, I'd like to request what next time you provide a trigger warning before critically discussing the dynamics of generational wealth transfer. Okay. Darbeard Dossier. I want to ask a question in hopes that Brooks understands how narrow-minded his view on the wealthy is. As of July 1st, 57.6% of black children are living absent of their biological father. Just because I am black does not make me guilty of the actions of the people who look like me. That's the exact mentality you have about the wealthy. If your claim is similar to trust fund babies can't be good people or trust fund babies. All right, we already covered
Yeah,
this.
I already explained that.
Mr. Member, hi Sam, back on the road for work, this time San Antonio. Stopped in a Starbucks, ran into a, shall I say, somewhat ripe guy in a Bernie 2020 shirt. He was going table to table, rearranging the varieties of sugars in perfectly equally diversified condiment communities while telling a disinterested barista about the latest political polls. Just kidding. Love John and his tiny bits of info. Oh. Core brand proposition. Best La Poupée music yet. Melania oozing. Chris Hayes may know how a bill becomes law, but is he sprouted his first? Okay. Secret identity politics. Islam isn't a race is going to be the name of my new book on why you shouldn't speed read the Quran. Shez Gargelet. In the field of psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect is cognitive bias, wherein persons of low ability suffer from illusory superiority when they are mistakenly assessed their cognitive ability as greater than it is. The cognitive bias of illusory superiority derives from the metacognitive inability of low-ability persons to recognize their own ineptitude. Without the self-awareness of metacognition, low-ability people cannot objectively evaluate their actual competence or incompetence. I think Donald Trump is the poster boy for his condition. DX Fool. Hi, folks. Heard Cliff Schechter yesterday on Nicole Sandler's podcast via Progressive Voices Network. He mentioned he suffered from Graves' disease, and if it weren't for the PPCA, he'd be worse today. Sandler said that she'd been cancer-free for 9 months. Without the PPCA, she would have probably declared bankruptcy. Nice for you to share Cliff with other Air America alumni. Best remake of La Poupée. Jay-Z, to give you a comparative data point, the maximum size of an estate a couple can give away without inheritance tax in England without tax planning shenanigans, roughly 1.1 million, roughly 1/10 the U.S. federal equivalent. Wow. And remember, we still have a monarchy and a titled aristocracy. Mr. Stukes, how about a shofar? Celebrating my 10-year anniversary with my wife, and more importantly, my 30-month anniversary as an MR member. Our thing is broken, so it's...
I like that he said, and more importantly.
Kerry Prusa, who was a guy in Cross Comedy, which is that group I was in with David Cross and John Benjamin and a bunch of stuff, a bunch of people, had a line that I've never forgotten in a sketch he wrote, where his wife had, in the sketch, had, said, like, all you do is go out and smoke pot with your friends and then do your stupid comedy show, you don't care about me. And Carrie's line was, honey, you know this marriage is the 5th most important thing to me.
The 5th?
He said, like, it's one of the top 4 or 5 things to me. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the paraphrase is really funny. It's amazing how Shapiro was able to get Sam to cede authority to him, then reestablish a shared authority with Sam in a beta position, then co-opted the entire audience as his own.
I hope we have people that listen to all the interviews like that.
Total alpha male.
Me
Wonder
too.
if he was in ninja pajamas while calling in. Umar Shami. Kelly, although I disagree with your viewpoint on most of the arguments you have with your colleagues on the show, I agree with you about the bad taste in joking about the DNC dude. Seems too soon, too much. Matt, I thought you might enjoy this new quote from one of the developers behind the new Colossus. You can do many things with a Nazi and a hatchet. Also, I heard actual Nazis are offended by this game. Okay.
Pre-order.
How can we break the stranglehold of corporate values when our media is almost entirely where citizens get their information and perspectives from? It's a difficulty. Michigan man, it says so much about this country that we index the estate tax to inflation to protect the rich, but we don't index the minimum wage. Indeed. Joer, when it comes to the rich, I'm angry. This is a class warfare. We're living in a wage slave society. The only reason why this is on anyone's radar is because the American proletariat is finally pushing back. When push actually comes to shove, they will find solidarity with their rich cohorts. Yes, some trustafarians might vote for a Democrat or even Bernie Sanders, but trust me, it's us versus them, and they know it. Attorney Andrew, continuing my Phil Jackson equals the DCCC theory, Jim freaking Doland, the epitome of moronic racist trust fund baby, was able to part ways with Phil's sponsor. Then we have been able to reform the DCCC. Let that be a lesson for everyone. Second, you've all seen the Center for American Progress answer to Trump Care. The fixes to the ACA do not include a call for a public option or lowering of age to be Medicare. Vox analyzed it and said accepts 2/3 of the Senate bill, tax credits and low for insurers in underserved areas. Pathetic. Yeah, I didn't even look at that, frankly. Neff Hart, Kifei, wee. Kenny Mack, 44. Okay. With all apologies to Kelly, who's quite tired of it. Christmas Carol is an important thing to have in your political discussion arsenal. Most people tend to portray Ebenezer Scrooge as rich, when in fact he was a small business owner. An example of almost non-existent middle class at the time. This shows how vibrant middle class is not guaranteed in history, but actually quite rare. Also, I don't think anyone's mentioned that Judy Gold, excellent plays an aging comic with 3 kids in a broken-down car coming to grips with the possibility that her Borscht Belt band of comedy may be going out of style. She plays it in the 3rd episode of Showtime's I'm Dying Up Here, show loosely based on Mitzi Shore in the Comedy Store in the 70s.
I would watch that. Sounds really good.
Bull Prague. I don't have Showtime. There are many theories behind who killed who. Has anyone else noticed how quiet Ted Cruz's dad is on this?
Wait, who killed who?
Seth Rich. Jay Will.
I said, how are you?
Hey, Sam, I attended a meeting of local progressive youth groups yesterday and find myself growing more frustrated with them. These meetings always become grievance fest and less about actual planning, organizing, and communicating. I'm not in a positron do anything about it, but it's given me less hope that the local left can accomplish much. Please save me from losing my motivation. Look, everything is like this. So you just got to wade through it. But also you should speak up and say, let's focus on a positive agenda. Sam de Minimis, are you willing to admit there's a chance that everything you think you know about the facts on the ground in Syria could be inaccurate and based and biased towards a policy agenda in the U.S.?
Everything?
Well, wait a second. Let me just answer the question. I don't claim to know that much about what's going on in the ground in Syria. In fact, not most of, but a large part of my argument as to why we shouldn't get involved is because I am unclear on exactly what's going on the ground in Syria. However, I think Occam's razor is it makes the most sense to me, which is that the story that the White Helmets are staging like a Capricorn 1 like event for video cameras is unlikely. Is it conceivable to me that the Syrians hit a depot that had a mix of chemicals? Yes. Is it conceivable to me that military commanders on the ground ordered an attack like this without Assad knowing about it? Yes. Is it conceivable to me that Assad ordered it to test the limits of what he could get away with and use that as an intimidating force against civilians who are protecting the rebels that he's fighting against? Yes. Those are all much more likely explanations in my mind than the idea of people actually fictionalizing this entire thing. Nevertheless, my policy prescriptions are the same. But yes, am I willing to admit there's a chance that everything I think I know about the facts on the ground could be inaccurate? Yes. And biased towards a policy agenda in the U.S.? Well, I don't know what
policy agenda do you
listen,
see?
let me put it this way. And I'm not even sure what the policy agenda, but every belief you have is in some way, by stating it, biased towards a policy agenda, right? I could say, so that question is just maybe just poorly phrased. If you're saying that my assessment of what's on the ground my assessment of the facts is a function of my bias towards a policy agenda, then I would say, no, that's not the case. Because my opinion as to what the policy should be would be no intervention. I was very explicit that I didn't want the U.S. to bomb. In fact, I've been saying that since 2011 on national television.
Hello?
Scrumpy style. Normally, I would say lots of cowbell and a big horn section make a cover better. Not today. Erection meddling. Not sure if you mentioned the IMF report that came out this week downgrading the U.S. economic outlook. Take it for what it is, but they use some pretty sharp language. I will check it out. Lawn Chair Media, when is MR going to admit what really happened? The Obama Knockout Game Network simply provides seed money to a variety of liberal pundits. Bill Maher, Jimmy Dore, Sam Seder. We all know the real dispute between Dore and Seder is that Seder got to Seth Rich first. Seriously, why else would someone else argue against the Supreme Court's electoral implications?
Who's going to take out Rich?
Petrus.
I've got seed money for all of you. Let's see which idea works out.
Your guest didn't mention that the mortgage interest deduction is capped at about $1 million in total principal, total loan amount for a married couple, and already excludes second homes. Of course, there are ways to get around these limitations to agree. The highest end homes are often paid for in cash or are held in tax remote trusts or LLCs. Did your guest refer to himself as a king, as you as a queen for a week, Rachel? Inequality is a fact of life and always will be. If one accepts this statement is true, then the issue becomes, what are the minimum requirements that are needed to sustain a dignified life? That is health, education, and welfare. Universal basic income is being floated as a solution. We've talked about UBI on the show quite a bit.
Only if it's part of a broader package.
I'm relatively high up on the socioeconomic ladder. Enjoy the occasional hee-haw rerun. Do I draw the line at Dukes of Hazzard? All right, one more phone call. Oh. You're at 250 now. So. Okay. Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Pete Perlman, Sherman Oaks.
What's up, Pete?
Regarding your the wrestler guy, could it be possible that he's like pulling a reverse Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report, where he's actually sort of personally in agreement as a conservative, and he's just like playing the foil of the opposite? Although the difference is Stephen Colbert's audience is liberal and gets the fact that he's playing a conservative, whereas his audience may be so dumb they don't even get the fact that he's not really a liberal. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Wait, who are you talking about now?
The wrestler guy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yes. Oh, yes. The wrestler is definitely playing. I mean, wrestling is about marketing. He's just creating a villain, and this is a.
But do you think
villain.
he's actually a conservative playing a liberal?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I think he's probably
Maybe
not terribly invested in politics and probably just like a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
A strong one.
Strong.
Appreciate the call.
Okay.
Small businessman.
All right, one more. Calling from an 863 area code. Who's this? You are the final caller of the day.
Yeah, this is Roderick in Beaumont, Texas.
Hey, Robert, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to talk real quick about the Jimmy Dore and Tim Blacks and sometimes Kyle Kalinskis in the world. Like, there's a hint of privilege that reeks out of that. Like, if you're like, take me for example. I'm a straight male. I have a job. I get my insurance through my job. Trump being the president doesn't really too much affect my world that much. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And if I'll just sit there and go on the internet and sit there and say, we need to vote for this person or not vote for Hillary because she's just because she's the lesser of two evils and this and that. I'm sitting here spewing all this crap about all this and everything else. And it's not helping anybody at any point in time. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just really weird to listen to them talk. And I'm still subscribed to Jimmy Dore. I don't know why I haven't unsubscribed. I'm just lazy. It's easy to just swipe it off my notifications. But every video that comes up about, guess what Obama did first, or
I mean, look
what the DNC did, or this and that. It's just really annoying to listen to them talk. Because it's all coming from privilege. It's like none of that stuff affects them. So it doesn't matter if they sit there and say, don't vote for Hillary. to them. You know, it doesn't.
Well,
it's not going to affect them in any way.
I think there's some truth to that. And I also think, though, to be fair, it also comes from a tremendous amount of ignorance and laziness. And I would say
that's true too,
that it's also enhanced by the fact by YouTube as a revenue driver. There's a story in the New York Times today about a couple. I would call them kids, and she's 19, he's 22, and they had a kid together. She apparently was pregnant, and they're trying to make money on YouTube. And so they had this, I don't know, show or channel where they would go and do stunts. And apparently, the guy was like, okay, I'm going to hold this book and you're going to shoot me with a gun and the bullet will be stopped by the book. I'm not making this up. And she killed him.
Sounds promising.
She killed him. They had it videotaped. They have it from both angles. She's being charged apparently with manslaughter. And on some level, right, it's like the idea, they were talking, this is in the couple's last video posted on Monday, Ms. Perez and her boyfriend considered what it would be like to be one of those stars when we have 300,000 subscribers. And I think to a certain extent, look, that's what's going on here. You see, they are taking positions that are uninformed, and then they are seeing that there is a significant population out there that is, who want answers to these questions that are simplified but also intriguing, right? So the idea of like deep, dark conspiracies, the idea that things are rigged, the things that they're both disempowering in some respects, but they're also sort of, look, this is what Alex Jones has built his entire business on. And these people are borrowing from it, sometimes almost the same stories, but largely the methodology is the same. And I don't know how conscious they are or not of it. I mean, Tim Black comes on and then, there's like and I can only see this like reflected in my Twitter feed because I just don't have the time to go and investigate this stuff. And even if I did, I think I can't help but think that I shouldn't have more important things to do. But like then there's a series of videos that are made that are built off this, and then they reference them back in. And literally it all becomes about aggrievement and personality. And somebody was upset because I talked over Tim Black or whatever it was, but I'm the only one of these shows that would even would allow for an interview or questioning, right? I mean, Jimmy Dore never has anybody call in and question what he says. And much of it is just completely uninformed garbage. And it's the same with a lot of these people, but they're finding it profitable and they're building a business. And it is very much, the methodology is very much like when I go in and I see my daughter looking at, she makes slime that she learns on YouTube, and there are different people who sell slime. And literally the dynamic is very similar. It's like, hey, everybody. Hey, guys, listen, I'm sorry, but I just don't think you should be buying slime from, Betty Stevens of Slimy Sparkle, because I ordered this clear slime here with supposedly the styrofoam balls in it, but there was only 3 styrofoam balls in it, and she's just not good. You should buy your slime from this person. And it really just becomes about a combination of aggrievement and, they bemoan identity politics. Their entire sort of like business model is tribal, has nothing to do with the material they're talking about. People saying that I'm corporate because I pay essentially the Young Turks for them to teach us best practices on our YouTube videos. Like
or
this is
Sam
just
only cares about policy.
Well, it's
stupid.
But it's also just it's incredibly ignorant, but it's very tribal and it makes money.
But can I just loop back though, because this is relevant to our show and our process. When you talk about that terrible story of the girl shooting her boyfriend, is that why you're always trying to play the William Burroughs game with Matt in the morning? You don't know that reference?
No.
You don't know when Williams-Burroughs shot one of his girlfriends by trying to shoot a glass
his
off
wi-
of her,
it
or his
was
wife,
his wife.
excuse me.
Oh, right. Okay.
I was going to say, you're trying to do that with math to drive up
No.
your numbers.
But I mean, that's the point of that. But I gotta jump. That was appreciate the call.
One quick thing.
Yeah. Gotta be super
with
quick.
anti-Semitism, I don't know why anybody hasn't put two to two together with with the Republican base as far as dogless of politics. Every time Trump says fake news, all they hear is the Jews own the media and they're out to get me. I don't understand why nobody's put that together yet.
Well, there may be a little
with these
bit of that.
upticks in anti-Semitism, I mean, every time he says it 3 or 4 times a day. I don't know why nobody's put that together.
Lugenpress.
He may not be thinking that he's doing it.
Lugenpress.
He may not be thinking that he's doing it, but that's what his base hears is the Jews are out to get me. I don't understand why nobody's put that together yet.
It's possible. I appreciate the call. Last caller of the day. Good one. All right, folks. Going to take a couple IMs and then get going. I don't want to play that Alex Jones clip. It's too long. Let's see. All right, we'll take 5 more IMs. Geek Wonk. I'm tired of the fight over trust fund babies. Maybe Michael and Kelly need to devote a funner half to engage the question thoroughly. As someone who grew up with no... Wait, I don't get the logic of that. Someone who grew up with no money for McDonald's, then with enough to go to the country's most expensive university without debt. I can say that wealth changes people, but there's a real difference between people who use the opportunity they are given to make the world better without agenda and trust fund babies like Jared and Ivanka going to profit-seeking business despite not needing it.
Yeah, of course. I've already explained. I don't know how many times I explained this.
Matthew Film Guy. I've been saying about that NRA video, it's really like what you see on TV at the beginning of a Paul Verhoeven dystopian sci-fi action movie. RoboCop, Total Recall, Starship Troopers, take your pick. This video would fit seamlessly. That's right. That's like the one that gives you the sense of like, this is what has happened over the past 75 years as we've moved into this dystopian future. Brought about by the horrible virus that turns people into zombies.
RoboCop's a really good movie.
Christo. Speaking of lower tier wrestling, the Netflix series Glow slips in some lefty politics. This is the one that Marin's on. I got to check that out. Lewis77. Sarah Huckabee is the Marie Osmond after taking a year of eating KFC and cheesecake. Oh, that's not nice. Jay Shivone. I watched the second episode of Dying Up Here. I remember how good that Aaron Sorkin show about a knockoff SNL show was. The show is produced by serious Jim Carrey. We should be nicer to Jewelry Gold. I remember that SNL show was not good.
I thought he was being sarcastic.
I can't tell. I can't tell.
That show was horrific.
Horrific. Kyle, we now know the location of the blood coming out of her whatever was actually a facelift. Trump vindicated. Billy Buckner. Hoboken Mayor Don Zimmer not running again. Rumors she may become lieutenant governor with Murphy. She endorsed Ravi Bala, a Sikh, as a future mayor. Jen is very upset. I wanted to know if she voted for Donald Trump. Jen Gattono, a former Goldman trader, also running for mayor of Hoboken. She's very upset at the question. All right, this is too much. This came out of an indivisible group email. Please text Jen and ask her who she voted for. 201-780-6779. I don't know if I want to get in the business of giving out that phone number. All right. The final IM of the day. Single payer. Hey, beautiful people, it's my birthday. Racism, sexism, classism are all distress patterns we carry until we discharge them. We're steeped in classist, racist, sexist, ageist culture. We all have these patterns. It takes work to change. RC.org is a good resource. Mike has raised poor patterns. All right, happy birthday to you. I'd give you a shofar, but I can't. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is get